down in there.
So I got to hide it in my shoe. Yeah, it's in my Bitcoin wallet or something.
Yeah. Are you trying to say the word Bitcoin most on this episode?
Oh, that would
Game?
be a fun game. I'll take a sip of my hot chocolate every time somebody
Every
says the
time you
word.
say that. Crypto, Bitcoin. Yeah, well, that'll be a lot.
We get all chalked out, man.
We're behind the scenes, the Run With It podcast here, live with Tristan Pollock. This episode will be polished, edited, come out in your podcast player of choice within a couple of weeks. But you're going to see the unfiltered version where Ethan, does shots every time he says Bitcoin. We'll probably have
Of
to
hot
cut that
chocolate.
out of hot chocolate. Yeah,
That's very
but
Chicago.
we're running a little bit late. We're running a little bit late today. Let's get into it, guys. You ready?
Let's do it.
Yep.
Okay. Welcome to Run With It, the show that brings you untapped business ideas from successful entrepreneurs. My name is Chris Justin, and I'm here with Ethan Jenny. Ethan, how you doing today?
I'm doing good. I've been syncing my heart brain with my head brain lately. Feels good. Got this new tracker that I plug into my earlobe and have an app from the Heart Math company. So I don't know. It's good stuff.
Wow, that sounds good. Is it tracking your heart rate through your earlobe?
Yeah, not right now, but you can do it. You just clip it on your earlobe and it tracks your heart rate and checks the heart rate variability. And if you have a lower heart rate variability, it means you're in the zone. You have coherence.
No, man, you're opposite. That's wrong. You want a higher heart rate variability. You're going for the wrong thing right now.
No.
I'm 100% sure of that.
Why would you want a high variability in your heart rate? It'd be jumping around all over the place.
That is a sign of health. I guarantee it.
I win. I guarantee you. This is the battle of heart rate coherence.
Yeah,
how much? I will bet one Bitcoin.
Quite appropriate. Who is the top gun coherence?
All right, we got to get into this. Who are we talking about today, you think?
We're talking here with Tristan Pollock, and he is an entrepreneur, founder, startup investor, among many other things, currently building CTO.ai. He's invested $30 million into over 200 startups. That's pretty cool. But he brought an idea that we're going to talk about instead for a little bit. Tell us about it, Chris.
Yeah, the idea is a way to manage carbon emissions via the blockchain. And Tristan, what's the story behind this idea?
Yeah, so I've been spending a lot of time kind of in between the worlds of climate and impact tech and trying to find that intersection between, let's say, like Silicon Valley style lean startup entrepreneurship and the other side, which is a lot of times nonprofits or social enterprises. And another thing I'm really excited about is blockchain, decentralization, crypto, Bitcoin, just to get my mention in there too. And so I was just riffing on this when I saw, I love the idea of your guys' podcast. And I was like, well, what if we could combine those worlds a bit? And I've seen things here and there, but nothing that's, where is this status quo, operating site or platform that is, I can actually check on, governments, corporations, businesses, even individuals, and understand how much, who's net zero, what emissions are being contributed, what are they doing to offset, and have that kind of trustless platform. So that's kind of where it came from. It was that seems like the big thing. If you're ever to hold accountability, it's kind of like the shift from corporate social responsibility in big corporates, CSR, and now it's like ESG, environmental social governance, and they have metrics behind it. And so, I feel like this is kind of the natural movement of being able to take something and make it trustless so that, the blockchain tells the truth itself on where everyone is at with their emissions and are we tracking?
I think it's good to frame this a little bit around not necessarily the urgency of solving this problem from a climate standpoint. That is true. It's very urgent. I think it's the most pressing thing that we need to do as humans. We need to stay under that 2 degrees Celsius limit. in order to avoid mass extinction and droughts and famines and all that kind of stuff. But there's also the angle of investment opportunities here that are coming into it. Elon Musk recently made the news with his $100 million X Prize for carbon removal. It's the largest X Prize ever. Jeff Bezos also committed $10 billion. So a couple of orders of magnitude higher than Elon. Elon, you got to step your game up, man.
I want to see someone order a cheapo prize like that. States will give $100 for the best new battery technology.
Hey, it could be like the logos that we've had submitted for our
show.
It's kind of like when Forbes does the Forbes 30 under 30, and then I think someone in the New Yorker came out with the 3 under 3.
Nice.
Perfect.
There's
Chamath. One other point to add to this: Chamath Palihapitiya, I believe is how you pronounce his last name. He believes this will be a $1 trillion market by 2030. I think is what he said.
Do we know who that is? I don't know much about that guy.
He's a huge venture capitalist. He's one of the early employees at Facebook, and he's made a ton of money.
He runs Social Capital, and a lot of people want him to run for governor of California. He's very prolific on Twitter, kind of like Elon is, and he thinks he's putting a lot of money. He's a lot growth stage, later stage sort of investor. He'll put a lot of money behind something, but he's very bullish on the climate tech market. Thinks it's going to be huge. Governments are going to become big payers in it. And so, I think there's just a ton of potential. And even like today, I was just looking, you have Amazon too, right? Like they've launched their own climate fund. You have, all the big companies, Amazon, Twitter, Google, all have like these kind of like, let's be net zero by X date. And also now funds and things that are actually supporting some of the companies and startups and technologies in that arena, as well as some of like, let's say like Facebook or Amazon are playing around cryptocurrency. Amazon just today announced something where they were looking at developing nations and bringing that in. So I think that's kind of what, there's a lot of interest. Everyone's getting into both sides of this. And now how do we kind of fuse that to kind of use that buying power, that monetary, this kind of decentralized monetary power for good, and so to speak.
By the way, I do know Chamath. We go way back. I was just asking for that listener that might not understand. But thank you guys.
So why the blockchain? Let's talk about that. Why we've talked about this being a problem worth addressing both financially and for humanity's sake. But why, other than it's part of the zeitgeist and Bitcoin's price is at $47,000 or something like that today? Why does blockchain? What benefits does blockchain bring to solving the climate crisis?
Yeah, I think it comes back to that transparency of knowing and reporting where these governments, let's say if you think about the Paris Accord, and governments are signing this agreement and trying to be held accountable to the amount of emissions that they put out. How do we track this in this trustless way so that it's actually being reported and acted upon in the right in the right truth? And I think that's kind of where like blockchain comes into it, where we're seeing this decentralization has kind of put the power in the back of the hands of the people, and you have full visibility to query and understand where everyone tracks. And it's not just through, let's say, like one node of like, so Amazon saying they're going to go neutral by 2030 or so, that we actually can tell, based on emissions. And I think the big challenge is, how do you actually know the exact emissions? Because you're kind of counting on that responsibility of them to report. But there also might be other ways that you could tie in data sources, kind of like Chainlink does these smart contracts with other data sources and pulls them back to the blockchain, thus giving you data surrounding a contract. So it's not just, hey, this contract was signed, went from this person to that person. It's also like, and here are the other variables around that. And so I think there's some things there that could play well with other technologies that have been created and are tracking. And you plug this into, certain, maybe a total governance, a world governance sort of thing that's backed by some sort of coin, eco coin or something like this, that also you might be able to funnel back into it.
So there actually is already something called EcoCoin. And there's a site called Nori, which I found doing some research about this, kind of interesting. What they're doing is allowing you to purchase, they're putting a coin value on carbon basically, right? And so they're allowing farmers to sell carbon that they've removed from the atmosphere and sell that to people who are putting carbon out into the atmosphere. And they actually have two podcasts I'll shout out to. One is called Reversing Climate Change, the other Carbon Removal Newsroom, I believe. But yeah, a lot of informative content from them. And the business is up and running. Clearly they're doing something right. And I think, is this a competitor? I don't know. Maybe it's just a proof of concept. It seems like, especially in the blockchain space, people are throwing out all sorts of ideas and, seeing what sticks. So there's definitely space to add something to the equation for sure.
Well, before evaluating whether it makes sense to evaluate them as a competitor, I think that they are a good reason, a good example of why you don't need the blockchain. The way that they're actually implementing their solution right now, they're collecting money from users. You can log into their site and say, I want to offset my yearly carbon emissions. And the average American emits 16 metric tons of carbon per year. And that works out to be in about $270 of carbon emissions priced using their system. So you can just buy that. And then that, I guess I don't see the value of the blockchain in there, because when you buy it, it's not staying in some sort of marketplace. They're just putting it on the ledger and saying, immutably, you bought this.
So there's a discussion about this on one of those podcasts that I mentioned, and basically there's a few things that happen in selling these carbon credits as it is. Number one is you have administrative fees where a lot of things can be lost. I've heard estimates of up to 50% of the costs of handling these carbon credits just goes to sort of administrative costs and things like that. And then what can also happen is you can have double selling of credits, right? So it's like, this farmer farmed this much and they want to sell the credits they have, but they happen to just sell it to this, industrial polluter and this industrial polluter as well. And both industrial polluters get to say that they've improved the environment and everything's going great. And, and nobody's punished and it's not kept track of. And I guess the idea here is, especially when you do things like connect the Internet of Things, maybe you have sensors that actually go in the soil of the farmers and things like that to make sure we can tell how much carbon is being drawn in and things like this. So that is definitely part of the problem as I've seen it, that administration leaves room for errors and, double dealings and things like this. So
yeah, the other market that this reminds me of,
much.
I mean, the other market that this reminds me of that it's more mature is the SREC market, solar renewable energy credits. They've been sold for some time, and double counting is an issue with SRECs. I don't know why, honestly, that hasn't been solved. It seems like that's not that hard of a problem, that you don't need a blockchain to prevent double counting of transactions, right? You do have a trusted third party in that instance, which is the bank. But if you have that trusted third party anyway, because carbon emissions are hard to measure without having an oracle or a human to be able to pin that back to the blockchain, then how much value is there to the blockchain in itself? But anyway, that can be a rhetorical question. I don't want to harp on that too much here.
I'll add one more thing on the side of the administrative fees too. One advantage, as at least I'm not an expert on blockchain, but as it was presented, is by you're literally cutting out some of these middle people that are just kind of filling out paperwork and keeping track of things and running around, maybe even traveling across the globe to figure this out or that out. And now all of a sudden, they're not even part of the equation, and that way the whole system's less expensive. So, some people are out of a job, but it's probably okay. So that's another. It seems to be like it's maybe another
I mean, there's
advantage of the
definitely
blockchain
some.
system.
Yeah. So if 50% of the price of emissions credits goes toward the middlemen of this, then there's definitely room for improvement there. Nori charges a 15% very transparent administrative fee for managing those sales. So I guess go ahead.
I was just going to say, also the interesting resource, air miners is a thing, and that I found out while I was researching this. So you can actually, mine the air for carbon, and there's a whole group around this. I think they're just called the air miners. They've got a Slack group, and there's companies being built all around. All that they're doing is taking the carbon out of the air and selling the credits, and that's their business. So it's very reassuring that this could turn into a profitable endeavor where all you're doing is sort of trying to reverse what's already been put out there, and you can make some money off of it. So
I've got to go on a mini rant
piece
about carbon removal, so I'm just gonna can indulge me here.
Rant us.
Yeah. So when we're talking about the carbon emissions that are going to have this catastrophic impact, it's a very small percentage of the atmosphere that needs to that if it's filled with CO2 will cause these catastrophic effects on the orders of parts per million. The line in the sand is 450 parts per million. If you go above that, then you're going to get the worst effects of climate change. So that'd be like saying you've got this giant pool of 1 million green marbles, and right now there are 400 yellow marbles in there, and you're going to try and remove some of those yellow marbles to get down to 350 yellow marbles. You're trying to find a needle in a haystack, right? You're trying to pull out these marbles that you can't otherwise distinguish, other than they're just slightly different. So I don't see that. I see that.
Don't trees pull those marbles out of the air every day?
They do. But I'm saying that there are people who are creating solutions that do this, but it's not easy to do that. It's not trivial. It's not efficient necessarily to do that. And I think like Nori, they're very big in trying to remove carbon, and to the exclusion, maybe not the exclusion, but not as much focus on trying to reduce emissions. And it's much easier to keep those marbles from intermingling with each other in the first place. So rant over on that.
Yes, that was, I would qualify that as many.
Yeah.
Good job.
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely some interesting solutions, and it's probably a combination of a variety of big ideas that help, keep us in a place that's safe for the environment. And maybe the thought behind this idea is like bring some kind of cohesiveness to everything. Like you guys were talking about that kind of double dipping on one person's carbon offset. That's one thing, but then just like trying to figure out, and maybe that's something like, I don't know, like a patch, which does, has like an API or, but something at least on like that can handle that kind of industrial level. So you have an idea of who's pulling carbon out, whether it's geoengineering or reforestation, and then also like who's putting carbon in, and, maybe not as definitely needed on the industrial level, maybe not quite as powerful on the individual level, but still could be kind of interesting just to know, like, everyone's how many people in a country there are, how many are offsetting, trying to pull that data. I think the tricky part is the data, really, I guess, is the underlying factor here.
Are we imagining this to be optional? So I'm jumping to, I realize you're talking about data, but does someone
regulation?
Even if you have all that data, even if you figure all that out, which there are all sorts of challenges to do that, are we just going to leave it then to the goodwill of people to to spend the extra few $100 per year to offset their emissions?
Yeah, and I think that's what kind of Chaima's point with how big the industry is going to get, because most likely there's going to be some government enforced cap, and a lot of the big tech companies are just getting ahead of that by knowing that they're going to offset all their emissions. So that obviously then forces it to become, a huge industry if it isn't already. But yeah, I think I don't know. It's on an individual level, the US is tricky, but I think in a lot of other parts of the Western world, it's something that's probably a lot more common and something that's talked about a lot more often.
I just want to bring up some sort of just a feasibility of projects and other things that are interesting that are going on similar space. I literally just met with a guy earlier today who's a co-founder of a project called Green the Bid. And he actually he's worked in film and TV production, things like this. And they've created a movement to help people who do film and TV productions to make their productions green, right? And, one of the things that he said was, isn't it too bad that people want to do a green production, but it's kind of like the last priority, that it's sort of the last thing that gets cut. Oh yeah, okay, so yeah, we want to do it green, but we'll cut whatever that carbon credit is or whatever we're going to do to make it green. And basically he's saying what he wants to do is make it something where people kind of commit ahead of time to this line item that they're going to budget in, and it just becomes a natural part of what you do. So it's not something that's special anymore. Like, oh, look, we did this eco-friendly shoot. No, like all shoots are eco-friendly. Of course, this is just a piece of the puzzle that always gets put in. And I think what's really exciting about the climate, no pun intended, today is that, we're getting to the point where we're raising our awareness around these things so much that I can foresee that there's a day in which it's just something that you take into account. Just like we manage our energy consumption by looking at our electricity bill now, companies could more easily manage their consumption and their production of carbon emissions and things like this, because it's monitored and everybody just takes it for granted. That's something you consider.
I love your optimism, Ethan. You're just a never-ending optimist. Believing
I can
that's
be well, I'm wearing my heart coherence monitor. So
but you're going for low heart rate variability, so you're in the opposite direction. I want to throw out, so before we get into some action steps and nuts and bolts here, I'm going to throw out one other alternative approach, and it is a highly regulatory based approach. It's a carbon fee and dividend. And there may be some interesting aspects that we can pull into a private sector model here, but the basic way that would work is carbon is priced on the emissions level, and I think that the starting point is $15 per metric ton. You would measure the industrial emitters, so oil refineries, for example, and the total number of emitters that you'd have to measure is actually not super high. So you're not going all the way down to the person, because the energy use that you use, Ethan, in your car, that energy had to go through a refinery. And if it's electricity, it had to go through a coal power plant or wherever. So measure it at that level, price those people. So add the $15 per metric ton, and then you give that money back to Americans in the form of a dividend, and it's equally distributed. And that has the benefit of both increasing the price of energy so that you are naturally going to use less of it, but also being neutral in terms of your ability to spend money and finance things on a household level. Say they're projecting that 58% of Americans would actually get more money as a result of the dividend, because they don't use as much energy as the top 42% of folks. So there's a lot in that to unpack. You can, we'll link to that in the show notes, but there are a lot of approaches out here for how to handle this, measurement and market making, incentivizing problem? Like, how do you create a market around this such that we more appropriately value the negative impacts of
A little
energy
shout
use?
out to a book I'm reading right now. Maybe you read it recently, Chris. I know somebody else we know did it, a couple of people. This book by Jocko Willink, Extreme Ownership. Anyways, it's sort of off topic but on topic. In whatever you just explained, I totally did not understand it. It's hard to say. Maybe I was just off in a different zone. But one thing that he points out in this book, he's dealing with, he talks about war stories, he talks about a company that he's consulting with. If something's too complicated, people just can't do it. And I think, whatever needs to happen, it needs to be something where it's simple and people it's like they just get it, and whatever complication, it must happen behind the scenes. And then the everyday citizen can just figure out the details. In terms of, so let's talk about starting this up. Let's talk about what's working in the Bitcoin, or not the Bitcoin, but just blockchain space. How do we get started? Do we just start creating a backend? Do we hire software developers? Do we partner with oil companies? Anybody got any first steps?
ICO all the way. Yeah, I think actually, now we're kind of getting back to maybe the other half of this, and I think Chris has a point with that method of like making people, like, it's super, and combining your guys' idea, it's like super simple. Like, why do people love Bitcoin? Because the price keeps going up. Why do people, and same with any altcoin. And so I think I'd love to see some sort of potentially this finance with some sort of coin that's actually on, makes it to Coinbase, and, it makes it to that mainstream level, makes the company, just obviously the company could structured and can provide some real value or insight or transparency around the climate industry. And then at the same time, there's this kind of like exciting cryptocurrency undertone to it that belongs to the people, and gives the people this like data that they can hold people accountable. So I feel like that's the other maybe secret sauce to it, is like, yeah, I saw the EcoCoin example and I'm just like, why isn't this bigger? Why isn't like everyone trading in this? And like, what could we do with the blockchain aspect of this so that everybody's trading in this coin, and thus making this company, this chain super rich, so that we can better, funneling this money back into the problem and the solution.
Yeah, I think that's a big challenge with ICOs. You're infinitely more qualified to speak to this than either of us, but a lot of the value that creates in blockchain is due to people using it. I mean, exponentially, right? So Bitcoin is super valuable because the ledger has existed for as long as it has, and because there are all these validators and people trading in it. So all those also rans that happen, they don't have nearly as much security and assurance of reliability, all those sorts of things. So I mean, that's a long way of stating that there are a ton of coins out here that this isn't that out there or novel of an idea, or maybe even hard to do, that there aren't going to be dozens of competitors. How do you actually get enough market share with this coin to get all the value?
Yeah, I think if you look at some of the other most successful altcoins, there's a real technology, a real service behind what they're doing. You could look at, like I said, Link with smart contracts, Aave, even like some of the exchanges like Uniswap and things like that. So there's like some real true intrinsic value lying underneath the coin. And in this case, this could be something that is, there could be a regulatory force that actually forces people to report, almost like your taxes, at least at the corporate level, government level, if not down to the individual level at some point. Like you said, it just eventually comes into the culture as a necessity that just like you take for granted.
But why one coin over another? So are we just relying on the government to say they're going to pick our coin and not pick EcoCoin?
It's got to be a movement behind it. I think it's got to have a true technology that works, and then it's got to have a movement behind it. And I think what makes a lot of these coins successful is they have something that's adding something to the blockchain, adding something of value, and then they have a bunch of people, really dedicated community behind it that have the time because they made a bunch of money on it. So I'm like, how do we, like, that's a cool network effect, but how do we make people a bunch of money by doing good? And I think that's like kind of the 10-year transition of impact investing and like, clean tech to like climate tech is, a lot of people thought, hey, I'm just doing good, but it's more like a donation. And I think maybe there's a combination of there that is happening now, like we've seen with like the VC levels of the VC growing 5x faster in investment into climate tech over overall VC since 2013. And so like that kind of increase in VC investment and increase of people entering the field, I think maybe it is the right time to kind of combine those worlds so that people are like greedy and doing the right thing. And that there's something like you guys are kind of touching on it, especially with Jocko. It's like that behavior, right? Making it super simple and highly incentivized in order to do this. And so maybe some people are just profiting off of the coin doing well, but really a lot of people might be also really impassioned about the underlying technology. I think that's the kind of combination you need.
Yeah, I'm trying to imagine sort of the scenarios in which it manifests itself. I'm almost thinking of like an inverse coin, right? Like a coin that goes up in value the less carbon is in the atmosphere or something like that, right?
Yeah, I like that. Yeah.
And potentially a situation where you can trade it, and the people who want to buy it are the ones who feel like they can actually have an impact on making the value go up. So you can give away your coin for sure, but then somebody else might grab it, and that person is now going to be incentivized. They're holding a certain amount of that coin, to improve the state of the environment. I like that it gives a tangible a value to this thing that we really nobody can really quite wrap their head around in this moment. I'll just bring up something a little bit off topic, but just like success stories. I was looking for success stories. I'm sure there's plenty nowadays of people doing things in blockchain, but I did find one of an indie hacker, Dean Frankenhauser. He makes $15,000 a month with BitCompare. That's a comparison website for the crypto industry. He started a little over a year ago, August 2019. He aggregates information on the value of various crypto savings accounts, exchanges, brokers, things like this. And he makes money through affiliate links to the various offers he compares. So I don't know, just an interesting tidbit about starting things in this space. This one particularly to me, it's got that odor of selling shovels, right? Doing things that help facilitate what's already being done and being an aggregation type site. So I don't know if there's a space for that within our carbon emissions idea, but it could be a nice direction to start your thinking.
Yeah, I think it definitely has to have that, like, build in the open feel, that journey telling where it feels like people feel part of it. I think that's sometimes what's missing is that people just, they're kind of like too many steps removed from what's going on. Me in my house, doing my recycling or composting or not doing it. A lot of times you don't see that maybe most of my recycling is going and actually being rejected, or like there's just such a disconnect to some of these methods of trying to be green or environmentally friendly. So to that point, maybe there's a way to give that kind of feel that commitment, and it's a little bit more front and center.
Yeah, on that topic, I heard you on another podcast, I think, talking about your experience with startup accelerators and startup incubators, and sort of one of the things that can come out of those situations is learning better storytelling to both the clients that you have and potential investors. Is there anything that kind of sticks out in your memory about things you learned about storytelling, or maybe skills you feel you already had naturally that have helped with your success?
Yeah, definitely. Rule number one I'm breaking right now is just being not having practiced this pitch enough. It's definitely a raw idea, And I think when it comes to storytelling, you're going to iterate, hundreds, if not thousands of times over the lifetime of a company. And, that down to the very words you put in your tagline, because you're always learning more. And the whole point of a startup, right, is you don't know everything yet. So you're trying to figure it out. So I think that's what I love about Run With It and your podcast here, is that it gives you that chance to this is like one iteration, or many iterations throughout this whole podcast. And now you have time to kind of like reflect and kind of challenge each other and figure out what makes the most sense. And no doubt I think there's always going to be competitors and other people doing things. And maybe there's room for lots of solutions here. But we're just kind of coming at it from like that idealistic view of like, what if there was this like one incredible solution, and trying to push to that. But in turn, then that competition, rises everyone together most of the time, because you're as good as your average competitor, or however that saying goes. So I feel like that's like one of the big things in storytelling is like, you have to kind of practice that pitch over and over and over again, to the point where you're always going to be like tweaking these little things and tweaking it for the different people you're speaking to.
Yeah, like a repetition and optimization model. Definitely seems to work.
Yeah.
And, again, just to toot our own horn here, Jeff Proctor came on our show, brought the idea of the uber expensive water bottle. And, that was, round one iteration, say, on that idea. Not to say that Fitbit stole the idea from us, but they created other iterations of this and now released their whatever $80 to $100 water bottle. Just a little bit down the line.
Yeah. Wait, how good is this water bottle?
It's Chris saw it. I don't know. Bluetooth enabled, USB.
Okay.
I don't know.
It controls your HRV.
Heart coherence tracking. Yeah, I don't know.
Attaches with the EKG to your entire body, and you can track all your vitals.
All right. Well, we're coming up on time here. Tristan, it's been a pleasure speaking with you. Where can listeners go to learn more about what you're doing?
Yeah, hit me up on tristanpollock.com or Pollock on Twitter.
Short and sweet. All right. To the listener out there, scratch that first bit, Ari. To the listener, go out and follow through on what Tristan has shared here. Let us know what you think about this idea. Tell us where we're completely off, or where we got things right. We'd love to hear some feedback from you. Email us at update@runwithit.fm. Subscribe to us in your podcast player of choice and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. It's a great way to let us know how we're doing and help make the show better for you all. Until next time, thank you very much, Tristan Pollock. And to the listener, we'll see you next time.
All right.
Never.
I'll get us off the streaming.
We can't
never see you.
We can't see you. You can just see us.
We'll be hiding in the depths of we'll be hiding in the recesses of your mind.